And what if the beginning of a lineage was not a sign of blessing but of judgment? When a son is born, everyone expects joy, continuity, inheritance. But what if heaven already knew that that firstborn would carry something somber in his soul? The story of heir does not begin with light, it begins with silence, and in that silence, something is about to collapse. Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, was at a moment of transition. After betraying his brother Joseph, he distances himself from his family and goes down to the region of Adullam. There, far from his father's eyes, he tries to restart his life. He marries the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua, and with her has 3 sons. The first, Ur. Ur was born in a strange land outside the house of Israel, amidst alliances with peoples who did not fear God. He was Judah's firstborn, the one who should carry the name and be the heir of the family blessing. But the Bible does not spend many words on his childhood, his youth, or even his deeds. The silence around Ur is almost deafening, as if it were already a premonition that something was off balance. Being the firstborn in that culture was a position of honor and responsibility. Ur should have been the continuation of God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but instead, he became the first obstacle. The biblical text in Genesis 38 presents his name directly, as if the author merely wanted to record the birth and move on, without attachment, without details, like someone who knows there is something uncomfortable in his trajectory. Still, Ur represents a turning point. His existence serves as the beginning of a chain of events that would bring pain, shame, and later, redemption. He is like a stone thrown into a lake, small but capable of generating waves that will reach the entire history of God's people. Before continuing with the story, write in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know how far God's message is reaching. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow more inspirational stories. The arrival of Ur marks more than the birth of a son. It marks the beginning of a deviation, and when someone deviates, heaven watches in silence until it decides to act. Judah's distancing from his brothers was not just geographical, it was a silent rupture with everything he had lived until then. After what they did to Joseph, selling their own brother as a slave, something changed within him. The Bible does not say that Judah confessed repentance, but it shows that he withdrew. He went down to the region of Adullam and began to walk on his own, as if trying to leave the past behind. There, he met a man named Hirah and became close to him. It was in this new environment that Judah saw the daughter of Shua, a Canaanite woman, and decided to take her as his wife. This marriage already indicated an even greater distancing from the paths taught by his father Jacob. The Canaanites did not fear God, and forming a family with someone from that people put the spiritual future of the lineage at risk. Even so, Judah followed through with his decision. He and his wife had 3 sons, Ur, Onan, and Shelah. The order of birth seemed normal, but the surrounding scenario showed that the construction of this new family was on unstable ground. Judah had started a lineage distant from the original blessing that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Ur was born in this environment. There were no declared blessings, no recorded spiritual paternal advice, no renewed covenant, just the fact Judah's firstborn was born. And this, in itself, already pointed to a problem. Judah had distanced himself from his family and, even more importantly, from the story that God was writing with them. The new home that Judah built seemed to have a normal structure on the outside, but on the inside, it was a house without a spiritual foundation. No mention of Judah seeking God, no guidance for his sons, no foundation that prepared Ur to honor the role he would inherit. This distancing took a toll. The son born in that context became the first to be judged directly by God. But the judgment would not come without first showing that wrong choices, even silent ones, generate deep consequences. Judah did not realize it at the time, but his attempt to start over without God opened the doors to a sequence of pains that would change his life. Judah continued with his life in that new land, raising his sons far from the environment in which he had been raised. When reached the age to marry, Judah took a wife for him named Tamar. The Bible does not give many details about her past, nor about her family origin, but the text makes it clear that Judah made the decision on his own. It was he who chose Tamar for his eldest son. The choice of Tamar marks an important point in the story. Judah, as a father, had the responsibility to find a wife who could honor his family's lineage. Even removed from everything he had lived before, he was still the one making the most important decisions. Tamar, then, enters the story as someone who did not ask to be there, but was placed in that marriage by a choice that was not hers. The relationship between and Tamar is not described in detail. The Bible only shows that in a short time, something became clear before God. Was an evil man, and his wickedness was so serious that the Lord decided to take his life. As death was direct and without human explanations, God saw what no one else saw, and Tamar was widowed before even truly beginning a life with her husband. Even without a voice in the story up to this point, Tamar became a central piece. Widowed, young, without children, she became a vulnerable woman in a culture that did not give space to women without a husband or inheritance. But there was still hope. The tradition of the time said that when a man died without leaving children, the younger brother should take the widowed wife and produce offspring in place of the dead brother. It was what was called the levirate law. Tamar knew this. Judah did too. The choice of Tamar seemed only a common marriage decision, but in truth, she was placed exactly where she should be to give continuity to a story that was still being formed. Even in the face of death, there was still a possible path, and Judah would need to decide whether to follow through with what was right or if he would continue leaving things halfway done. Death was quick, but it was not without reason. The biblical text is direct. Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord put him to death. There are no more details, no description of what he did, no explanation of the type of behavior, just an objective affirmation. What he practiced was serious enough for God to decide to interrupt his life. This shows that even far from Jacob's house, God remained present. Judah may have tried to start over somewhere else, with new alliances and other priorities, but God did not exit the scene. He saw wickedness, and he did not ignore it. The judgment came without warning, without detours, and without space for second chances. Wickedness was not just a common mistake, something that could be corrected over time. It was something grave, continuous, and clearly disrespectful before God. If it was something mild, there would have been correction, but the divine decision was radical. The punishment came in the most definitive form, death. This makes it clear that the life led was not just indifferent, but offensive. Judah, as a father, could not prevent it. He saw his firstborn son die young. The loss was great, but no lament is recorded, no deep reaction. This may indicate that Judah knew something was wrong with his son's behavior. Perhaps it was not a complete surprise, and even so, the situation demanded moving forward. With dead, the responsibility fell upon the next brother, Onan. By tradition, he should marry Tamar and ensure the continuation of the deceased brother's name. This was important not only for memory, but also for the stability of Tamar, who now depended on this new union to have some kind of future. Story ends dryly. He appears, grows up, marries, and dies, all in a few lines. But the impact of his wickedness changes everything around. What he did, although not detailed, was enough to interrupt his role in history, and now, with his absence, others will have to deal with the consequences left behind. When died, everything changed. A death without warning, without detailed explanation, but with an enormous weight. It was not common for a firstborn son to die so young, even more so in a context where family lineage held so much value. Was Judah's first. He should give continuity to the family's history. Instead, his life was definitively interrupted. His death was not just a personal tragedy, it was a divine response. God saw something that no one else could see. Had attitudes that went against everything that was right. The decision to remove him from the scene was a sign that God was still in control, even when people tried to live their own way. Judah chose to start over in another land, made alliances with outside peoples, made decisions without consulting God's will. But God did not remain silent, and was the first to feel the weight of this. For Tamar, the death was a blow. She had been given in marriage to a man who did not value her and who was abruptly taken from her life. She had no children, no time, not even the chance to build a home. Now she was alone. And in a culture where a woman needed a husband to have social value, this was a heavy sentence. But there was a responsibility to be fulfilled. Onan, the second son, should take place and give a child to Tamar. This child would be considered Er's descendant. This practice preserved the family name and the dead brother's inheritance. It was a way to keep the continuity of the generation alive. Er's death did not erase his obligation as firstborn. Even dead, he still had a responsibility that would now fall upon his brother. This shows how, in that culture, lineage and family honor had a weight that surpassed individual life. The story did not stop with death. It continued. Judah knew this. Onan also. And Tamar, though silent, hoped that what was right would be done. Er's death brought pain, but it also opened a space for justice to be put to the test. It was time to see if someone would fulfill what was expected, even with everything out of place. After Er's death, Judah called his second son Onan and gave a clear order that he lie with Tamar and produce children in his brother's name. This was part of the levirate tradition, well known among ancient peoples. The younger brother assumed this responsibility to ensure that the deceased's name continued among the living, especially when the brother had died without leaving children. Onan understood what he should do. He knew exactly what his role was, but he also knew what this decision would mean. If Tamar had a son, that boy would not be recognized as Onan's son, but as heirs. This would affect Onan's inheritance, rights, and place within the family, and it was then that he decided to act selfishly. Even accepting the union with Tamar, Onan took a hidden action whenever he lay with her. He prevented the possibility of pregnancy, ensuring that Tamar did not have children. He fulfilled only part of the obligation, which was enough to seem like obedience. But inside he was deceiving. God saw. As had happened with there was no speech, no warning. Onan was judged and killed. What he did was not just disobedience to a tradition. It was a refusal to fulfill a duty that was part of the preservation of the family. He placed his own interests above everything. Onan's death generated even more tension. Now Tamar had lost 2 husbands, brothers, without leaving children. And Judah began to see the situation differently. In his eyes, Tamar seemed to be the problem. Perhaps he thought her presence brought some kind of bad luck. Even without fault, she began to be seen as a burden, someone who should be kept away. The third son, Shelah, was still young, and Judah told Tamar to go back to her father's house and wait for the boy to grow up. But deep down, he had no intention of fulfilling what he promised. He just wanted to push Tamar away, to remove the woman who had already married 2 of his sons and remained childless. The tradition was clear, the duty was known, but fear and selfishness began to change the course of history. Tamar returned to her father's house as Judah commanded. But time passed, and no new word came from him. The promise was clear. When Shelah grew up, he would be given to her as a husband. Thus, the lineage would continue and justice would be done. But this promise was never fulfilled. Tamar waited year after year and realized she had been forgotten. Shelah grew up. He was already a grown man, but Judah never sent for her. There was no longer any intention of fulfilling what he said. Tamar became invisible. She was no longer remembered as a daughter-in-law, nor treated as part of the family. For Judah, perhaps it was easier to leave her far away, silent, isolated, than to face the responsibility that was still pending. In practice, Tamar was cast aside as if she were a problem to be avoided. Even without fault, she carried the burden of having lost 2 husbands and being childless. That, in the eyes of society, was seen as a sign of shame. She began to live as a widow, but without the rights a widow should have, without inheritance, without support, without a future. Judah, for his part, went on with life. His Canaanite wife eventually died, but even then, he did not remember Tamar. Time went on as if everything was resolved, when in reality there was an outstanding debt. Judah had made a promise and did not keep it. There was a pending settlement, and he pretended it did not exist. Tamar knew that the only chance to reclaim her place was through the fulfillment of that promise. But alone, without support, and without a voice, she would have to take action on her own. Judah's silence was not just neglect. It was a form of injustice. He knew what he should do, but chose the more comfortable path. The story was paused, but not over. The absence of action generated more pain than the previous tragedies. Tamar was not just a forgotten woman. She was someone who carried a right that had been ignored, and even without making noise, she prepared a move that would completely change the course of Judah's history. Tamar knew that waiting any longer would be useless. Sheila's time had already come, but nothing changed. Judah did not keep his word. Faced with this abandonment, she decided to act. It was not an impulsive decision, nor made in anger. It was a thoughtful response, in the face of a broken promise and an injustice that had dragged on for years. During this time, Judah was also going about his commitments. He went up to Timnah to participate in the sheep shearing, a common activity among herd breeders. The news reached Tamar, and she saw an opportunity in it. She put on different clothes, covered her face, and positioned herself at the roadside where Judah would pass. He saw her, did not recognize her, and thought she was a prostitute. Judah approached her and made a proposal. In exchange for the encounter, he promised to give a young goat from the flock, but she asked for a guarantee until the payment arrived. He handed over the seal, the cord, and the staff, personal objects and easy to identify. That was the key to what would come next. After the encounter, Judah went on his way. Later, he tried to send the young goat through a friend, but could not find the woman. He asked the men of the city, and no one knew who she was. The matter seemed to end there, without major consequences. 3 months later, the news came. Tamar was pregnant, and since she was still considered part of Judah's house, the information reached him. The reaction was immediate. He ordered her to be brought out and burned as punishment for becoming pregnant outside of marriage. In his mind, Tamar had shamed the family. It was easier to judge her than to admit his own fault. The moment Tamar was being brought out, she sent a message to Judah. She did not shout, she did not accuse. She just sent the objects that he himself had left with her, the seal, the cord, and the staff, and along with them a direct phrase, "The father of the child is the owner of these things." The justice that Judah had tried to avoid for years was now before him, without noise, without explanation, without defense. And it was not vengeance. It was just the truth returning to the place where it should have been from the beginning. Judah looked at the objects he received and understood everything instantly. There was no denying it. He recognized the seal, the cord, and the staff. They were his. And along with that came the weight of conscience. The woman he ordered to be brought out of the house and condemned was the same one he had cast aside. It was Tamar, the one he himself promised to give to Sheila and never fulfilled. Judah's reaction was different from what many expected. He did not try to justify himself. He did not place the blame on her, nor did he try to hide what happened. He admitted in every word, "She is more righteous than I." This was not just any phrase. It was a public acknowledgement that he had erred, that he had failed as a father, as a man, and as the one responsible for that situation. Tamar was not punished. Judah assumed the error and never had relations with her again. She returned to live in peace and sometime later gave birth to twins, Perez and Zerah. The birth of the two sons marked a new chapter in Tamar's life and also in the history of Judah's family. Perez, the first to be born, would become an important name in the genealogy of the people of Israel. From him, the lineage of Judah would continue and later would reach David and finally, Jesus. The story that seemed broken, forgotten, and outside the original plan returned to the right path. Judah was also transformed by this experience. The man who one day distanced himself from his brothers, made wrong alliances, deceived Tamar, and ignored promises, now showed a different posture. Later, when he reunited with his brothers in Egypt, it was he who stepped forward and defended Benjamin bravely. He was a different man. Tamar, even without being heard for a long time, was responsible for giving continuity to the promise. Her attitude ensured that justice was done, even without support, and her courage changed the destiny of the generation that would come after her. The story between Judah and Tamar was marked by error, omission, and silence. But in the end, there was correctness, recognition, and continuity. Even with everything outside expectations, the result was a true restart. The birth of Perez put Judah back on the path that God had planned. The lineage of the promise continued through this son. He became the direct ancestor of King David and many years later of Jesus. When one reads the genealogy of Christ, Tamar's name is there. Judah's too. Perez's, of course, but Er's does not appear. Was Judah's first son. He had everything to be the name remembered, the one responsible for continuing the family inheritance. But that is not what happened. He died early, childless, and exited the story. His name remained registered as someone who was wicked before God. Nothing more. No other deed, no positive impact, only the remembrance of judgment. This shows that the position of firstborn guaranteed nothing. Having been born first was not enough. What really counted was the heart and the willingness to do what was right. Had the chance, but chose a path that distanced him from God's will. And when God decided to interrupt his life, others were raised up to follow ahead. His story serves as a warning. Er's absence in the messianic lineage was not just any detail. It was a direct consequence of his attitudes. He could have been part of the greater story, but preferred to follow a path of disobedience. And he ended up leaving space for another to occupy the place that could have been his. At the same time, the story shows that God is not limited by human failures. Even when someone fails, God continues working. Tamar, who seemed forgotten, was used to bring the purpose back. Judah, who had been lost, was transformed, and Perez, son of an improbable encounter, was chosen to continue with the promise. Er's absence reminds us that not all beginnings end well, but it also reinforces that God does not depend on those who refuse to walk with him. He raises others, opens paths, and fulfills everything he promised. In the end, the name that remains is not that of the one who had the chance, but of the one who decided to obey, even when everything seemed out of place. If you liked this video and like biblical stories like this, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next videos. Leave your like and share this video with someone you love and needs to learn more about the Word of God. May God bless you and see you in the next video.